The Theory of Moral Sentiments by Adam Smith. Part 2 of Merit and Demerit, or of the Objects of Reward and Punishment, consisting of 3 sections. Section 1 of the Sense of Merit and Demerit. Chapter 5 The Analysis of the Sense of Merit and Demerit. As our sense, therefore, of the propriety of conduct arises from what I shall call a direct sympathy with the affections and motives of the person who acts, so our sense of its merits arise from what I shall call an indirect sympathy with the gratitude of the person who is, if I may say so, acted upon. As we cannot, indeed, enter thoroughly into the gratitude of the person who receives the benefit, unless we beforehand approve of the motive of the benefactor, so upon this account the sense of merit seems to be a compounded sentiment, and to be made up of 2 distinct emotions, a direct sympathy with the sentiments of the agent, and an indirect sympathy with the gratitude of those who receive the benefit of his actions. We may, upon the different occasions, plainly distinguish those 2 different emotions, combining and uniting together in our sense of the good desert of a particular character or action. When we read in history concerning actions of proper and beneficent greatness of mind, how eagerly do we enter into such designs! How much are we animated by that high-spirited generosity which directs them! How keen are we for their success! How grieved are their disappointment! In imagination we become the very person whose actions are represented to us. We transport ourselves in fancy to the senses of those distant and forgotten adventures, and imagine ourselves acting the part of a Scipio or Camillus, a Timoleon or an Aristides. So far our sentiments are founded upon the direct sympathy with the person who acts, nor is it indirect sympathy with those who receive the benefit of such actions less sensibly felt. Whenever we place ourselves in the situation of these last, with what warm and affectionate fellow-feeling do we enter into their gratitude towards those who serve them so essentially! We embrace, as it were, the benefactor along with them. Our heart readily sympathizes with the highest transports of their grateful affection. No honors, no rewards, we think, can be too great for them to bestow upon him. When they make this proper return for our services, we heartily applaud and go along with them, but are shocked beyond all measure if by their conduct they appear to have little sense of the obligations conferred upon them. Our whole sense, in short, of the merit and good desert of such actions, of propriety and fitness of recompensing them, and making the person who performed them rejoice in his turn, arises from the sympathetic emotions of gratitude and love, with which, when we bring home to our own breast the situation of those principally concerned, we feel ourselves naturally transported towards the man who could act with such proper and noble beneficence. In the same manner as our sense of the impropriety of conduct arises from a want of sympathy or from a direct antipathy to affections and motives of the agent, so our sense from its demerit arises from what I shall hereto call an indirect sympathy with the resentment of the sufferer. As we cannot indeed enter into the resentment of the sufferer unless our heart beforehand disapproves the motives of the agent and renounces all fellow-feeling with them, so upon this account the sense of demerit, as well as that of merit, seems to be compounded sentiment, and to be made up of 2 distinct emotions, a direct antipathy to the sentiments of the agent, and an indirect sympathy with the resentment of the sufferer. We may here too, upon many different occasions, plainly distinguish those 2 different emotions, combining and uniting together in our sense of the ill desert of a particular character or action. When we read in history concerning the perfidy and cruelty of a Borgia or a Nero, our heart rises up against the detestable sentiments which influence their conduct, and renounces with horror and abomination all fellow-feeling with such execrable motives. So far our sentiments are founded upon the direct antipathy to the affections of the agent, and the indirect sympathy with the resentment of the sufferers is still more sensibly felt when we bring home to ourselves the situation of the persons whom those scourges of mankind insulted, murdered, or betrayed. What indignation do we not feel against such insolent and inhuman oppressors of the earth! Our sympathy with the unavoidable distress of the innocent sufferers is not more real nor more lively than our fellow feeling with their just and natural resentment. The former sentiment only heightens the latter, and the idea of their distress serves only to inflame and to blow up our animosity against those who occasioned it. When we think of the anguish of the sufferers, we take part with them more earnestly against their oppressors, we enter with more eagerness into all their schemes of vengeance, and feel ourselves every moment wrecking in imagination upon such violators of the laws of society, that punishment with our sympathetic indignation tells us is due to their crimes. Our sense of the horror and dreadful atrocity of such conduct and delight which we take in hearing that it was properly punished, the indignation which we feel when it escapes this due retaliation, our whole sense and feeling, in short, of its ill desert, of the propriety of fitness of inflicting evil upon the person who is guilty of it, and making him grieve in his turn, arises from the sympathetic indignation which naturally boils up in the breast of the spectator whenever he thoroughly brings home to himself the case of the sufferer.